If they do anything to stop the flow of oil or goods within the Strait of Hormuz, they will be hit by the world's most powerful military 20 times harder than they have been hit thus far.
Right now, tensions around Iran and global energy security are heating up again, and the language coming from political leaders is extremely direct. A recent statement defended US military strikes targeting Iran's missile infrastructure, and the message behind it is very clear. Protect global shipping lanes, protect energy supplies, and send a warning to anyone thinking about disrupting the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway carries a huge portion of the world's oil supply every single day. So when leaders talk about defending it, they're not just talking about regional politics, they're talking about the stability of the global economy itself. And the rhetoric you're about to hear frames these military actions as both strategic and necessary, while also delivering a very blunt warning about what could happen next if the situation escalates further. Listen closely to the full statement.
As President Trump shared with the American people last night, the United States military is making tremendous strides towards achieving our military objectives for Operation Epic Fury. 10 days in, this campaign has been a resounding success thus far, and America's warriors are winning this important fight at an even faster pace than we anticipated. More than 5,000 enemy targets have been struck so far. Iran's ballistic missile attacks are down more than 90%, and their drone attacks are down by approximately 85% since the start of Operation Epic Fury. The United States is also annihilating the Iranian regime's navy, and we have destroyed more than 50 Iranian naval vessels, including a major drone carrier ship. None of the regime's vessels are operating in major regional waterways, and the Iranian Navy has been assessed as combat ineffective. The trend is clear. U.S. combat capabilities are increasing and growing more lethal and dominant by the day, while the Iranian terrorist regime's ability to respond has rapidly declined. Now, the U.S. military is moving to dismantle Iran's missile production infrastructure. Our incredible B-2 bombers recently dropped dozens of 2,000-pound penetrator bombs on deeply buried missile sites. Last night, President Trump reiterated his commitment toward keeping oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz so the United States and all of our allies can receive their energy needs. President Trump will not allow rogue Iranian terrorists to stop the freedom of navigation and the free flow of energy. Let me be clear. It is a good thing to wipe out terrorists who indiscriminately target civilians and attempt to hold the global economy hostage, and President Trump should be commended for doing so. As the president made unequivocally clear to the remaining elements of this terrorist regime in his statement yesterday, if they do anything to stop the flow of oil or goods within the Strait of Hormuz, they will be hit by the world's most powerful military 20 times harder than they have been hit thus far. Moving forward, the stated objectives for Operation Epic Fury remain the same: destroy the terrorist regime's ballistic missiles, raise their Iranian missile industry to the ground, ensure their terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region, and ensure that Iran never obtains a nuclear weapon. President Trump remains confident these goals will be accomplished in swift fashion. As for the oil, President Trump fully expected the rogue Iranian regime to try and disrupt the global markets. That's why President Trump and his energy team have been planning for this long before the strike and have moved quickly to address these temporary disruptions. Thus far, the Trump administration has offered political risk insurance to tankers operating in the Gulf. The Treasury temporarily waived certain oil-related sanctions, and the Commander-in-Chief has offered the U.S. Navy to escort tankers when necessary.
Now that you've heard the full statement, there's a lot happening beneath the surface of that message. First, notice the tone. It's confident, forceful, and designed to project strength. The speaker isn't simply describing a military strike. They're building a narrative around it. A narrative where the United States is positioned as defending global stability, protecting energy supply, and preventing disruption to the international economy. That framing matters politically because it elevates the stakes of the action. Instead of sounding like a regional conflict, it becomes a defense of the global system itself. And that is a very common strategy. In political communication during international crises, connect the action to something bigger, something that affects everyone, and suddenly the justification becomes easier to understand for a broader audience. Another major element here is the constant reference to the Strait of Hormuz. That location is incredibly important in global trade. Roughly 1/5 of the world's oil shipments pass through that narrow corridor. So when political leaders talk about protecting that route, they are really talking about protecting global economic stability, fuel prices, shipping routes, supply chains. They all depend on that passage staying open. And by highlighting that fact, the speaker frames the military action as protecting not just one country, but the entire global economy. Then there's the warning itself, the statement that any attempt to block oil shipments would be met with retaliation 20 times harder. That kind of language is classic deterrence messaging. It's meant to send a signal before anything even happens. The idea is simple: make the consequences sound so overwhelming that no one wants to test them. Whether that actually prevents escalation is always debated, but the purpose of the rhetoric is very clear. Project strength, project confidence, and make the cost of confrontation sound extremely high. Another detail that stands out is the mention of specific military capabilities: B-2 bombers, bunker-penetrating bombs, deeply buried missile sites. Those details are not just informational, they are symbolic. When leaders reference advanced weapon systems, they are reinforcing the idea of technological superiority. They are reminding audiences that the United States has capabilities that few other nations possess. And that reminder plays a role both domestically and internationally. Domestically, it reassures supporters that the military is powerful and capable. Internationally, it sends a message to adversaries about the scale of force that could be used if tensions escalate further. The statement also uses strong moral framing. The opposing side is described as terrorists targeting civilians and threatening the global economy. That language simplifies a complicated geopolitical conflict into a clear moral narrative: good versus bad, stability versus disruption, protection versus threat. This kind of framing is very common in political rhetoric because it removes ambiguity. When audiences hear that civilians and global economic stability are being threatened, the justification for strong action becomes easier to accept. But the statement is not only about military justification, it also includes clear political messaging. The president is praised directly, and the actions are described as decisive leadership. That praise serves a political purpose. During moments of international tension, strong leadership narratives can reinforce support among political allies and supporters. It sends the message that the administration is acting firmly and protecting national interests. But these statements are not just aimed at voters, they are also aimed at foreign governments. Every public statement during a geopolitical crisis is carefully watched by allies and adversaries alike. Leaders analyse the tone, the threats, the confidence level, and the signals about future responses. In that sense, the speech itself becomes part of the strategy. It's communication designed to influence how other countries calculate their next move. And then there's the role of the media in shaping how this moment is interpreted. Different outlets will frame the same statement in very different ways. Supporters might say this is strong leadership and effective deterrence. They'll argue that clear warnings prevent conflict by making consequences obvious. Critics might see the same rhetoric as escalatory, arguing that dramatic language can sometimes push tensions even higher in already fragile situations. The reality is that political messaging often operates in that space between deterrence and escalation, strong enough to discourage aggression, but risky if interpreted as provocation. Another interesting part of the statement is the economic focus: energy supply, global markets, shipping routes. These are not just military talking points, they are economic ones. By emphasizing the global energy supply, the message connects national security directly to everyday economic stability. Gas prices, transportation costs, and global trade all depend on stable energy routes. So the argument being presented is that protecting the Strait of Hormuz protects the global economy itself, and that framing broadens the audience that might support the action. Because it's not just about military strategy anymore, it's about economic security for millions of people around the world. There's also an important concept in international politics called credibility. When leaders issue strong warnings publicly, they are putting their credibility on the line. If those warnings are ignored without consequences, deterrence weakens. But if those warnings are enforced, the perception of strength grows stronger. That's why statements like the one you just heard are often so dramatic. They are designed to leave no ambiguity about what could happen next. But as history shows, geopolitical conflicts rarely stay simple. Military strikes, economic pressure, diplomacy, and political messaging all interact in complicated ways over time. And that's why analysts pay so much attention, not only to what leaders do, but also to how they talk about it. Because language shapes perception, perception shapes political support, and political support often shapes the next decisions that get made. In the end, the real impact of a statement like this depends on what happens next. If tensions calm down and global shipping continues without disruption, supporters will say strong messaging helped deter conflict. If tensions rise further, critics may argue the rhetoric helped fuel escalation. Either way, moments like this show how political leaders use language to frame military action, influence public opinion, and send signals to the rest of the world. And now the question turns to you. Do you think strong warnings like this help prevent conflict by showing resolve? Or do they risk pushing already tense situations even closer to escalation? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you want more breakdowns of major political moments and the messaging behind them, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for the next analysis.